Hi, this is Steve Virtuin with Viewpoint Security, and in this video I'm going to give a quick overview of the new Massachusetts law protecting personal information, 201 CMR 17. CMR stands for Commonwealth of Massachusetts Regulation, and 201 CMR 17 takes effect on January 1st, 2010. So let's begin by taking a look at the document itself. We're not going to cover all the sections, rather general points that could have the most impact. First, let's look at the scope. In a broad interpretation, this not only applies to companies doing business with Massachusetts consumers, but to any entity possessing personal information. Think about an in-house HR database, for example. This is yet to be fully worked out, but I'd like to point out it's best to be cautious, and a sound security posture is a good thing in any case. The next section, definitions, is pretty much common sense, covers various components of your organization, until we get down to the section personal information. In the context of this regulation, personal information is defined as a person's first and last name and any one of the following: social security number, driver's license or state ID, credit or debit card, or financial account number. For example, a personal check would have your first and last name and a bank routing number, so that would certainly be subject to this regulation. The next section is, to me, the core of this regulation. 1703. Every person that owns, licenses, stores, or maintains personal information about a resident of the Commonwealth shall develop, implement, and maintain a comprehensive written information security program. What does that mean? Information security programs really start with security policies, and the regulation requires a written security policy. So why don't we touch on that for a moment? Written security policies are established at the top level of a company, and they're designed to protect the company's most critical assets and the best approach to protecting those assets. Typical policies cover topics such as acceptable use, encryption, virtual private networks, antivirus, and others as required by the organization. Usually they're assigned to one person. In this regulation, they're required to be assigned to a person, and they're required to be reviewed usually annually or when everything has changed. So going back to the actual document, gets a little vague at this point, but what they're really saying is that any policy should be compliant and similar to any state, federal regulations or typical security policies, which you can really find out there on the web. There are several organizations that develop templates and cover most of the dozens of policies that usually applies. But any policies that you develop will really have to be customized for your organization, and that's an area where some outside expertise could probably come into handy, come into some help, like us. I'd like to touch on a couple of other points in this section. As I mentioned, you have to have one or more employees designated as responsible for your information security program. Now, this employee must be it can't be outsourced. It has to be someone in-house. Once you designate that person in turn can seek any assistance they want. But I guess the point is that there must be someone on staff designated as responsible for the security program. Also, the document requires training, which is really talking about user awareness training. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the document. Another important point, procedure must be documented for what do we do when someone is terminated. How do we disable their account and make sure they no longer have access to any confidential data. Briefly touching on Section F there, reasonable steps to verify that third-party service providers will protect such information. What they're really talking about there are, say, credit card processing bureaus, and most of those companies have procedures in place to deal with these type of regulations and can supply you with supporting documentation. Just make sure to keep a copy on file and you're probably covered. G, limiting the amount of personal information, common sense. H, and other places scattered throughout the document, identifying paper, electronic, and other records. What they're really talking about is a concept called data classification. So let's take a moment to talk about that. Data classification is the decision to assign a level of sensitivity to data. In other words, let's take some examples. We usually recommend 3 levels of classification: public, internal, confidential. Public would be, say, marketing literature. Internal would be an employee phone book. Confidential, obviously, would be any personal information as defined in the context of this document, and other things, intellectual property, etc. So that's really what they're getting at in that section of the document, as well as some other sections. So moving on, it also talks about, like we were saying, checks are confidential, so physical security is important in section I. Section J. Okay, what they're really talking about here is intrusion detection. In other words, we want to know if someone is trying to attack your network. And intrusion detection is a fairly complex subject. So let's take a moment once again to break off from the document and go to a slide. Intrusion detection system consists of hardware and software designed to detect unwanted attempts at access. For example, multiple failed logons to a privileged account. It will then also possess the capability to alert you to those events. There are 2 general types, host and network based. In the context of this document, they seem to be talking more toward the host base. In other words, monitor the logs for signs of foul play. Now, in the Windows environment, there are security logs which can be looked at, but the reality of trying to comb through the logs to determine what's going on is kind of impractical, and that's where intrusion detection systems come into place. They watch things for you, let you know when something's gone awry. There are many different types of IDS systems: open source, commercial. Some of them are large and complex, and there are some quite affordable and applicable to small business, but it's kind of beyond the scope of this video to get into all of the various types. So we're going to move on. I'll try to cover them again in a future presentation. So, moving on. What we're getting into here is password management. Now, password management, I know I'm moving fast, but this has to be wrapped up quickly. Password management, in the context of this document, they talk about a couple methods: reasonably secure, or use of unique identifiers. Unique identifiers are like 2-factor authentication, and we don't think that's necessary by our interpretation. Reasonably secure should be doable with Microsoft password complexity policies and a group policy approach. So that's probably what we'd recommend in terms of password management. We can certainly talk about other approaches should you be interested. Restrict access, once again, that has to do with data classification. And then they kind of hop all around on file encryption. So we're going to take a quick look at what they're talking about. 2 contexts: data stored on laptops and data in motion, meaning mostly email or wireless. So think about encrypting all of your email. Make sure you're using WPA2, and if there's any chance anything is going to be on a laptop, any personal information, make sure to encrypt that laptop. There are many different ways to do this, once again, outside the scope of this video. Open source, commercial, many good approaches. 7 and 8, we're going to wrap this up. 7, up-to-date versions of system security agent software and antivirus, and we can cover all that in terms of patch management and antivirus. Make sure in a Windows environment you keep up with your monthly patches, and make sure you keep up with your antivirus programs. Put it in a document, follow that document. And the very last statement is talking about user awareness training. It's required for everybody. You can do it in-house with assistance, in-house on your own, or you can outsource it online, not very expensive. But no matter what the approach, some customization will be necessary, talking about what your confidential data is, and the training must be ongoing. So just about out of time, I'm wrapping this up. I will try to follow up with more videos, and you can reach me at the email address on the screen. I hope this video has been of some use to you, and as I say, look for future updates soon.